Hello everyone, and welcome back to Boss Economic World. The show that peels back the jargon-filled onion of global finance to find the juicy, sometimes tear-jerking, truth at its core. Today, we're diving into a story that feels less like economics and more like the season finale of the world's most high-stakes reality TV show. Let's call it The Great Economic Bachelorette. Our beautiful, sought-after contestant? The 11-nation ASEAN bloc, young, dynamic, and with a GDP growing faster than a Silicon Valley startup's ego. And our two final suitors, vying for her affection with roses made of trade deals and promises of eternal economic prosperity? You guessed it, the ever-persistent dragon, China, and the comeback kid, the eagle, the USA, led once again by the one and only Donald Trump. The date is October 28, 2025. The setting is Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The air is thick with the smell of durian and geopolitical tension. Let's set the scene, because context, my friends, is everything. The world of late 2025 isn't the world of 2020. President Trump is back in the White House, and his America First playbook has been updated to version 2.0. It's less about broadside attacks and more about surgical, transactional strikes. Think less economic carpet bombing, more laser-guided deal-making. Meanwhile, China is grappling with its own epic sequel, The Hangover Part 4, the real estate bubble. Its domestic economy is sluggish, its demographic cliff is looking less like a hill and more like the Grand Canyon, and its factories are churning out so much green tech, solar panels, batteries, electric vehicles, that they're facing a colossal problem of industrial overcapacity. In plain English? They've built way too much stuff and need anyone, to buy it. This is the backdrop for the dramatic events that unfolded just this week in Southeast Asia. So, picture this. Chinese Premier Li Qiang, the calm and collected number 2 in Beijing, lands in Kuala Lumpur. He's not there for the Petronas Towers selfie. He's there to put a very big, very shiny ring on ASEAN's finger. This ring is called CAFTA 3.0, the China-ASEAN Free Trade Area version 3.0. Now, on the surface, this sounds about as exciting as reading an instruction manual for a toaster. Upgraded free trade pact, lowering barriers, yawn. But that, my friends, is the camouflage. This isn't just a trade deal, it's a masterpiece of economic statecraft. It's China playing the long game, laying the foundations for a future where its economic gravity is simply irresistible. Let's break down what CAFTA 3.0 really means. First, the Green Economy Clause. This is the crown jewel of the deal. China is committing to helping ASEAN go green. Sounds lovely, right? Altruistic, even. But let's restore the full picture. Remember that industrial overcapacity I mentioned? China currently produces over 70% of the world's solar panels, nearly 80% of its lithium-ion batteries, and is on track to produce more than 20 million electric vehicles this year alone, far more than its domestic market can absorb. The US and Europe are slamming the doors shut with tariffs, calling it green dumping. So, where do you sell all these EVs and solar panels? You find a massive, growing market of 680 million people, and you sign a deal that not only lowers tariffs on your green products but also, and this is the killer move, commits both sides to jointly developing regulatory standards for them. Think about what that means. If ASEAN countries adopt China's standards for EV charging ports, battery specifications, and smart grid technology, whose cars do you think will be easier to sell there? BYD, NIO, and XPeng, or Ford and Volkswagen? It's like getting the entire continent to agree that all their outlets should be the Chinese plug type. You've just locked out the competition not with a tax, but with the very architecture of the system. It's a green-tinted Trojan horse, and it's brilliant. The agreement even includes a line saying neither side will use environmental standards as a disguised means of trade protectionism. That's a direct shot at the West. It's China saying to ASEAN, their green standards are just an excuse to block our stuff. Our deal is the real free trade. Second, supply chain connectivity. Again, sounds boring, but it's the plumbing of 21st century economics. This isn't just about ships and trucks. It's about digital customs clearance, harmonized tracking systems, and seamless data exchange. China's goal is to deeply embed its supply chains with ASEAN's. For a company in Vietnam or Thailand, it will become faster, cheaper, and easier to source components from Shenzhen than from anywhere else. This creates a powerful China plus one model that is still fundamentally China-centric. Companies might move final assembly to Vietnam to avoid US tariffs, but if the entire upstream supply chain, the batteries, the screens, the processors, is inextricably linked to China through deals like CAFTA 3.0, who really holds the power? It's like moving your desk to the next room but keeping the Wi-Fi router and the coffee machine in the original office. You're still dependent. During his speech, Premier Li dropped some not-so-subtle shade, talking about interference by external forces and unreasonable high tariffs. He didn't have to say USA, everyone in the room knew who was on his mind. The message was clear, they offer chaos and bullying, we offer unity and prosperity. Choose us. Now, no good reality show has just one suitor. Just as Premier Li was preparing his grand proposal, who else but Donald Trump was wrapping up his own whirlwind tour of the region. Trump's style is the complete opposite of China's. China plays the long, strategic game of multilateral integration. Trump plays high-stakes, bilateral poker. He doesn't care about building a grand, interconnected system. He wants specific, tangible wins for America, and he wants them now. So, what did Trump put on the table? He didn't come with a sweeping ASEAN-US free trade area. That's too bureaucratic, too globalist for his brand. Instead, he came with a briefcase full of targeted deals. The headline grabber: rare earth minerals. The US military and tech industry have been in a low-grade panic for years about their dependence on China for the 17 elements that are crucial for everything from F-35 fighter jets and Tomahawk missiles to the magnets in EV motors and iPhones. China has historically controlled over 85% of the global processing of these minerals. Trump's deal, signed with Malaysia and a couple of other key players, provides US investment and technical support to ramp up mining and processing of rare earths outside of China. In return, the US gets preferential access. For example, it shores up operations like the Lynas rare earths plant in Malaysia, one of the few significant non-Chinese processors in the world. The message to Beijing is, your chokehold on the building blocks of modern technology is over. Then comes the sweetener, the classic Trumpian quid pro quo. For countries that played ball, like Malaysia, he offered tariff exemptions on key exports. The prompt mentions palm oil, cocoa, and pharmaceuticals. This is textbook art of the deal. You want to sell us your palm oil without tariffs? Great. We need a guaranteed supply of dysprosium and neodymium. Let's make a deal. It's a fundamentally different value proposition. China offers deep, systemic integration. The US offers transactional market access and strategic security partnerships. China is asking ASEAN to marry into its family. The US is asking to be its powerful, rich, and slightly unpredictable friend with benefits. This brings us to the most important player in this whole drama, ASEAN itself. For years, the narrative was that these smaller nations were just pawns, helplessly caught between two giants. That narrative is now dangerously out of date. ASEAN isn't a pawn. It's the queen on the chessboard. And it's playing both sides with breathtaking skill. Let's look at the numbers. The prompt makes a crucial point: ASEAN now sells more goods to the US than to China. This is a massive, and often overlooked, fact. Why? Because while China is the workshop of the world, the US is the customer of the world. The American consumer's appetite for electronics assembled in Vietnam, furniture made in Malaysia, and sneakers stitched in Indonesia is insatiable. ASEAN leaders are not stupid. They know who pays top dollar for their finished goods. Siding completely with China would risk angering their wealthiest customer, a customer who, under Trump, is not shy about using tariffs as a weapon. So, they sign deals with Trump, exempting their key products and securing access to that vital American market. They get the cash. But at the same time, their factories need a steady, cheap supply of parts, components, and raw materials to make those goods. And who is the undisputed king of industrial inputs? China. As of 2025, over 25% of all intermediate goods imported by ASEAN nations come from China. The next closest is Japan, at around 8%. So, what do? They sign CAFTA 3.0 with China, ensuring that the supply chain for their factories remains cheap and efficient. They get the components. Are you seeing the genius of this? It's a strategy of strategic promiscuity. ASEAN is dating both suitors, and getting exactly what it wants from each. From China, they get massive infrastructure investment, cheap and abundant industrial components, a growing market for their own raw materials, a roadmap to build out their own green technology sector using Chinese tech. From the United States, they get access to the world's largest and richest consumer market, a security umbrella and a counterbalance to China's regional dominance, investment in high-tech sectors, a political hedge against becoming a vassal state to Beijing. This is the balancing act in its highest form. They met with Trump on Sunday to secure their profits, and they signed a deal with Qiang on Tuesday to secure their production lines. It's absolutely brilliant. So, what does this all mean for the future? When you read the headlines, China expands pact to counter US, you're only getting a sliver of the story. The full picture is this: we are witnessing the solidification of a new global economic order, and Southeast Asia is its epicenter. This isn't a Cold War with two separate, opposing blocs. It's a far more complex, intertwined, and competitive landscape. China's strategy is long-term and systemic. CAFTA 3.0 isn't about short-term export numbers. It's about creating a Sino-centric economic sphere of influence, bound by technology standards, digital infrastructure, and supply chain dependency. It's a patient, strategic play to make itself the indispensable economic partner for the world's fastest-growing region. The US strategy is tactical and opportunistic. Trump's deals are about securing immediate American interests, critical resources and market access, while disrupting China's grand plan. It's less about building an alternative system and more about ensuring America gets its cut and maintains leverage. ASEAN is the real winner, for now. By refusing to choose a side, ASEAN has turned the US-China rivalry into a bidding war for its affection. It is leveraging this geopolitical competition to accelerate its own economic development at an unprecedented rate. They are a masterclass in how smaller powers can navigate a multipolar world. The ultimate question is, how long can this balancing act last? China is betting that its economic gravity will eventually become too strong to resist. The US is betting that its combination of market power and security guarantees will keep ASEAN from falling completely into Beijing's orbit. The drama in Kuala Lumpur wasn't the end of the story. It was just the end of a season. The great economic bachelorette has given a rose to both suitors, telling them she'll see them next week. The competition for the future of the global economy is far from over, and the main stage is, and will continue to be, Southeast Asia. That's all the time we have for today. Remember to look past the headlines and always ask, what's the real story? Until next time, stay sharp and stay ahead.